In this portion of Module 5, we're going to cover borrowed content. And just to be clear, we are never stealing content. Everything here that we're going to talk about is white hat and completely legal in terms of both copyright laws and Google's preferences. So by borrowed content, we mean using others' content that they've placed out there on the web specifically for the purpose of having it shared and republished on other sites. So if you're using borrowed content, you're really doing the content author a favor by publishing it and including a link back to their site. That's exactly what they wanted to happen with this kind of content. It gives them a search engine benefit because of the link, and it also gives them some personal recognition in the marketplace by having their stuff republished and being out there for other people to see. And of course, you benefit by having somebody else's content on your site because you're feeding the Google spider with new content, which it's always looking for. And you're not having to write a full post yourself, and you're also giving your audience and your readers another person's viewpoint and another person's expertise, which can lead to a really great jumping off point for further conversations with your site visitors. It's a bit different, this borrowed content concept. It's a bit different than the curation workflow that we've already talked about, because these aren't necessarily new items that you're finding from current blogs in your niche. And generally, you'll be republishing the entirety of the other person's content rather than just an excerpt. Now, we talked briefly in Module 1 about Google's stance on duplicate content, but I want to cover that a little bit more in depth here so that you understand how using borrowed content is an effective strategy and at what point it can become detrimental. So you've heard of duplicate content, I'm sure, and you've probably also heard that duplicate content is a myth and not a real ranking factor or not a real problem. And both of those statements are actually just really a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what Google is looking for from you and your site. And rather than just tell you who's right, this person's right, that person's right, I'm going to show you exactly what Google says about duplicate content, and we're going to talk about what they mean by that so that you can understand yourself going forward. I don't want you to just believe me and take my word for it. I want you to understand for yourself, and that way you can evaluate what you're doing outside of this course. You can evaluate what other people are saying based on your actual understanding of the issue, rather than just believing whatever expert or teacher tells you next. So the biggest misconception about duplicate content is that it's primarily concerned with content that is copied from site A to site B, and that's just not true. The original duplicate content problem didn't come from people taking content from one source and reposting it onto their own site. It was actually an issue with content on your own domain being replicated time and time again at different URLs, but still within your own domain. So let me give you an example. If you're using WordPress, the same pieces of content, the same blog posts, could potentially live in several places, each with their own URL. So your article or blog post could be on your home page, if it's a newer post, so it's up at the top there. And it could also be on its individual post page. And then it could also be on the category page, or the tag page, or the archives page, or the author page. And that's just to name a few of the ways that WordPress can create a duplicate content problem within your own domain. So in a case like that, Google has to decide which one is the real article page, which one is the original source, the most important one, and then which of the others that it's found are all duplicates. So that the idea of duplicate content and a duplicate content penalty was actually originally born from this scenario, where the same content is listed multiple times on the same site at different URLs. Now, this is kind of a side note here because it doesn't specifically deal with borrowed content, but I want to give you a quick primer on how to fix that situation. You can use any of the popular WordPress SEO plugins like All-in-One SEO Pack, and that'll help let Google know what the original URL, the original source of that content is. And you can also do what I do here at michellemcpherson.com, which is to only publish the excerpt of the article on the category pages or the tag pages, the home page, and so on. So what you're looking at here is a tag page on my site, a category page for the category Internet Marketing. And as you can see, that each post only has a few lines of the text, and then it says continue reading. It's a summary of the post instead of the entire post. And that way, you can only read the entire article by visiting its actual URL, clicking the continue reading button, and then going to the post page. And that is what we do on our sites to avoid having a whole bunch of duplicate content on our own sites. We don't want that. Now, back to borrowed content. Let's talk about how using other people's content on your site can or can't harm you. So Google loves curation. It loves when content is shared. It loves when content is reposted. It loves when content is spread between users. That's all part of the social sharing thing beginning to be a ranking factor, right? It's the very fabric of the web, sharing and exchanging information. It's what people do. So here's a direct quote from Google on the matter. This is from the Google Webmaster Tools help section. They say duplicate content on a site is not grounds for action on that site unless it appears that the intent of the duplicate content is to be deceptive and manipulate search engine results. You might remember that quote. I published it in Module 1. I've repeated it here because it's that important. They are very, very specific in saying what they're looking for, and that is deception and manipulation, and that's when you cause a negative reaction from Google. So is it manipulative to share a piece of content that you read and you want your readers to enjoy as well? Of course not. That's natural. That's normal. Is it deceptive and manipulative to build an entire site only using other people's content that's auto-blogged by some WordPress plugin? Yeah, that's probably deceptive and manipulative to the search engine results. Now, the Panda update was built to find low-quality sites and content farms that depend on other people's content to survive. Sites that add little value to the web, sites whose content could be considered duplicate content in that the content could be found elsewhere or had originally been published on some other website. But Google still understands that the very same kind of sharing and reposting and all of that is part of the currency of the web, and it's what people do. They find something great and they want their own readers to benefit from it, and that is still okay. Now here's a quote from a Google employee named John Mew in a Google Webmaster Central Forum thread. That Google employee says, "It's really important to us that your site provides unique and compelling content of its own, even if you are referring to other sources. One way to do this could be to properly quote and link to the original source while making sure that your commentary makes up the majority of the content on those pages. Rewriting other sources without attribution or unique additional value is not something that our algorithms appreciate." That's a long quote, but he's told this user that he was replying to, he's told them exactly what to do. Even if you are referring to and quoting other people's content, you want to include your own commentary, of course, and you're also going to want to link to the original source. And of course, you already know how important that is from our work in Module 1, but I wanted to reiterate it because it is that important. Google also looks at your web page as a whole, so it will include all of the extra code in your page, the header, the sidebar, the footer, all of that code, as well as the actual content itself when it's determining what is and is not content that has been published elsewhere. So presumably all of that kind of stuff, all of the design elements, the formatting, the CSS, the code from your WordPress theme, those are all going to be different than the original content's source page. And because of that, you do have a different page than the original. It isn't a complete duplicate. It isn't an exact copy. And then adding your own thoughts to it just makes your page even more unique in Google's eyes. Plus, it brings an element of you to your readers, and in the end, they are the ones that matter the most to you. So when working with borrowed content, really ensure that you're bringing something of value to the table as well, and always attribute. Now, getting back to the idea of manipulation and deception, it's also a good idea not to base your entire site around borrowed content. I mean, it's common sense, right? Republishing every single YouTube video in your niche with nothing else on your site doesn't really bring any value to your marketplace, and Google's going to see right through that stuff, so just don't do it. But using borrowed content is a really great idea for a weekly or other kind of regular feature. So it'll fill up a spot in your editorial calendar where you don't have to think too much. And you can, every Wednesday is when you publish a piece of content from somebody else. It'll also give your readers a chance to get other people's viewpoints or other people's expertise in areas that you personally aren't as strong in. And to give you an example of that, I have an internet marketing blog at michellemcpherson.com. My expertise is not and has never been and probably will never be pay-per-click marketing. It's just not something that I engage in that often, and I think that there's other people who can teach that much better than I. So if I were to borrow some content with attribution and with my own comments, of course, from another marketer in the pay-per-click area, I would really be adding value to my readers, because that's a angle or a portion of internet marketing that I am not the best, guru or teacher on. So you can use borrowed content to explore areas that you are not the topmost expert in, and that you don't mind. I mean, I don't mind that I don't publish or teach in pay-per-click. It's not my thing. It isn't my passion, and that's fine. But it still has something to do with internet marketing, and some of my readers may well be interested in it. So you can look at borrowed content for those purposes as well. And also, since you'll be vetting the content the always be shipping way, you'll still absolutely be able to pass the mom test. Would you be proud to show this to your mom? And with what we're going to do in the future videos in this module, you will still, of course, be proud to show your mom and Google your borrowed content pieces.